Hello and welcome to our flip video lesson, A River Rules, lesson 4.01. Our lesson details will be our Human Odyssey reading pages 99 to 102, our student guide workbook page 95, our OMS assignment is assessment 4.01, and about the topic is an introduction to the Nile River and all it had to offer. What are we learning about today? Unit 4 lesson objectives. Explain ways the ancient Egyptians relied on the Nile and used it to create a civilization. Analyze maps to assess the importance of the Nile in ancient and modern Egypt. Identify the longest river in the world. Locate on a map the Nile River and the modern countries through which it flows. And recognize the characteristics of trade in ancient Egypt, including the products traded, the location of trading partners, and the importance of trade in Egyptian life. New unit introduction. So we are moving on to unit 4. So this is a basic overview of the entire unit 4. What's the recipe for civilization? Start with water and good soil. When you figure out how to grow plenty of crops, divert some attention to other activities. Divide up the work. Start by building villages and places to store your surplus food, and then cities. Spend some time inventing a system of writing and make laws. All these ingredients first combined in Sumer, but civilization soon sprang up in 3 other river valleys. So specifically, we're going to be talking about the Nile River Valley for Unit 4. Lesson 4.01. Introduction, A River Rules. If you could fly over Egypt in an airplane, you would notice a thin green ribbon running through a red-brown expanse of desert. It is the Nile River Valley. In this fertile strip of land, ancient Egypt flourished. Herodotus, an early Greek historian, called Egypt the gift of the Nile. Gift of the Nile. The Nile River provided water. Water from the Nile River was used for fishing, bathing, farming, cleaning, and trade. And a few fun facts. The Nile River actually flows from south to north and is the longest river in Africa. Lower Egypt. Lower Egypt in the north, remember we said it flows from the south all the way down at the bottom, all the way up to the north. So Lower Egypt is considered the north because that's where it flows into the Mediterranean Sea. Lower Egypt in the north is defined geographically by the Nile Delta, the wide flat area where the mighty river branches out to the Mediterranean Sea. The delta, which defines Lower Egypt, looks like an upside-down triangle. This lush, marshy region stretched out more than 100 miles, crisscrossed by branches of the Nile. The land in the delta areas was rich with silt. This created ideal conditions for growing crops, and that silt is from the Nile River overflowing and flooding onto the banks. Upper Egypt. Upper Egypt to the south rests in the fertile Nile Valley. Ancient Upper Egypt was protected from invaders in its southern end by the First Cataract, the first of the 6 Nile cataracts, the dangerous rapids that made the river impassable. In Upper Egypt, this protected fertile valley stretched about 8 miles wide across both banks of the Nile, from which the land sloped up gently into high desert plains. Ancient Egyptians called the dark, fertile soil of the valley the Black Land, and they called the desert areas bordering the valley the Red Land. In the Red Land, Egyptians buried their dead and built mighty pyramids as resting places for their rulers. Gift of the Nile. The Nile River gave Egyptians more access for trade routes. The ancient Egyptians were traders. Thanks to the Nile River, they had a surplus of food. They used this surplus to trade with other people and imported goods that they couldn't grow or find. And if you look at that map while I'm reading here, you can see the areas that they had and what they traded. Ancient Egyptians traded to obtain many different products, some which came from far away. So cedar came from Lebanon. Lapis lazuli came from Afghanistan, juniper came from Lebanon, ebony came from the coast of West Africa, copper came from the Nile Delta region, ivory came from the coast of West Africa, silver came from Syria, cattle came from the Nile River Valley in Sudan, or the Nile Valley I should say in Sudan, gold came from the Nile Valley south of Egypt, horses came from Iraq, incense came from the coast of West Africa, ostrich feathers came from far to the south in Africa near Lake Victoria. Gift of the Nile. The Nile River left fertile banks on its soil. Every year by late July, a month after the rainy season began in Central Africa, huge amounts of water coursed down the Nile. As rain swelled the river, the Nile began to overflow its banks, flooding the parched length of the land. This was usually a gentle rise, not as violent as the flooding rivers along the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. For several weeks, the Nile would cover the land with muddy water. When the river receded in September, it left behind a strip of rich black soil several miles wide on either side. And the key here is that the Nile River flooded every year, and it was fairly consistent, so farmers were able to gear or judge when they could plant their crops. And it also flooded in a fairly consistent way in that it wasn't just a rush of water, unpredictable. They were able to predict when it would flood, where it would flood, and how long it would flood, which made the Nile River Valley extremely successful in growing crops. The Nile River flows through the modern day countries of Uganda, Sudan, and Egypt. So those are these modern countries here. They weren't actually labeled as country during ancient civilization times, but we now know them as these countries. And it is the longest river in Africa. Okay, now there is some debate about it being the longest river in the world. You'll see that in our objectives, we stated that it was the longest river in the world. Which river do you think is in a close running with the Nile? I'll give you a hint. It's in South America. You can do your own research on that. So student guide questions today. Nope, we have none. If you take a look in your student guide, there are no questions that go with this lesson. We will be covering questions tomorrow for tomorrow's lesson. So you don't have anything to write down in your student guide today. So a few important vocabulary words for you to understand. Deposited means to put or set down something in a specific place. Modern means relating to present or recent times as opposed to the remote past. Herodotus or Herodotus was a Greek historian. When he visited Egypt, it is said that he famously called Egypt the gift of the Nile. And then a delta is a triangular tract of sediment deposited at the mouth of a river, typically where it diverges into several outlets. And we come to our quote section for today. Men argue, nature acts. Think about that for a minute. And that was said by Voltaire. So you have your reading pages 99 to 102. Do make sure that you complete that for a full understanding of this lesson. And thank you for joining me today. As always, stay positive, stay fighting, stay brave, stay ambitious, stay focused, and stay strong. Have a great day.